All right, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Meta Product. Right? So, why am I the right person to even talk about product? The reason is because I've been writing code since I was very, very, very young, since I was like 11 or 12 years old. In fact, even if you look at my online nickname, which was Ragecore or Ragecore1 or something, when I was very, very young, you'll actually find a lot of old forum posts by me on old game design forums where I'd ask funny questions or interesting questions about how to build a game, how to design levels. So I've been building digital products for a very long time, and recently we've also started investing in physical products, and we've been all over the maps. Especially with digital products. In the last year, Avalon has written over 1.1 million lines of code. As a freelancer, I've had more than 100 clients. I've built more than $150, $200 an hour at sometimes. So I've been through the entire circle when it comes to product. And as you guys know, Avalon has a lot of Fortune 500 clients today. We've worked with plethora of both small companies as well as big companies. And to be honest, the way both small companies as well as big companies today have started building product, whether it's digital or physical, has started becoming very similar. Right? It's the same idea of experimentation, observation, and repetition. But in this video, I'm going to actually teach you how product is done. We're going to go through an overview, and then we're actually going to dive into the exact specifics. Now, as you know, Meta is a platform where we don't just talk theory, we actually go hands-on. So a lot of things that are involved in product, like creating ER diagrams or understanding frameworks or running ads, we're going to do live. So let's get right to it. Alright guys, so this is Product 101. We are going to learn the AARRR framework, also known as the R framework. This was created by Dave McClure of 500 Startups. I think it's a very good way to put across how a digital product is built, but you could also apply it to physical products in a way. It's a well-structured theory for building and testing new products or startups. So the idea is that you start with acquisition, which is how do users find you? Then you go into activation, which is do users have a great first experience with your product? You'll be surprised with the number of products out there. The activation phase, which is the first experience that people have with you, can sometimes be the most important. If somebody has a bad first experience with you, I can guarantee you they're not coming back. Then there's the idea of retention, which is do they come back? What do they come back for? How many times are they coming back? Then there's revenue. How are you making money, right? At what point do you charge the customer? And then there's the idea of referrals, which is does that user who had a happy experience, does he tell other people, right? And all of this is super important, and we're going to go through each of these things one by one. So if you understand what we've spoken about so far, you'll see that acquisition has many different channels, right? And in the meta marketing and the meta sales side of the content, you'll understand how to actually do some of these things. So on the marketing and sales side, you have social networks. You can just post about your product, right? You can just go on Facebook and say, hey guys, I created this new app for you to manage how many hours your dog walked per day, right? You can actually just post on Facebook. So social network, you have SEO, you have search engine marketing, which is basically paid ads. SEO stands for search engine optimization. There's PR, which is you go out and write a press article, say Forbes writes an article about you or Times of India writes an article about you, and then you get traffic because of that. Then you have affiliates, which is somebody else who talks about you or who sends you a lead. You have business development, which is partnerships. You have blogs, you write a blog, you send out some emails, you can do vlogs, you can do widgets, campaigns, contests, ads, etc. Ads and SEM are pretty much the same thing. I don't know why I put it in there twice. Then you have the activation phase, which is now they've come, right? You've acquired this guy. He or she has somehow landed on your homepage. And today, whether you're selling a physical product or a digital product, you're probably selling it online, right? So even if you're buying something from Amazon, there's still the activation phase. So your product description, how it looks on Amazon, that is still very important. Even if you're at a car store selling a BMW, what is the experience that a person has when they first step into your car store? But for now, let's just talk about online sales, right? So you have a homepage. You have some features on that page. You have different landing pages that they can jump on and that they can arrive at. And then many of those features are what they go through. So they might go through some features. And then there's the idea of revenue, which is you either have a one-time revenue, you have subscription, you have ad space. You're probably selling, some space on your website, say you're a blog, and you have maybe 500 into 500 pixel space on the right where somebody else can come in and put ads. You have income sharing agreements, which is a fairly new way of making revenue, which is, you don't ask somebody to pay, but once, they get a job or something, you tell them, okay, 10% of whatever you make, I can take. So many different business models, and we'll talk about this. So revenue is essentially your business model. And then from the features, there's the idea of retention, right? Which is, how do they come back to the platform? Do they come back via emails? Do they come back via alerts? Do you send them a notification on their phone? Do they see some of your content and vlogs or something like that and come back? What is it that drives them back to the platform? And then obviously if they're happy, there's the idea of referrals, which is you put out a campaign and you tell every happy customer, hey, if you invite one other person, you'll get a 1+1. We'll give you a discount on your next deal. Or it could be you send them an email and you tell them, hey, can you just forward this email to other people and we'll give you some services for free. So invite a friend. Uber did this in the early days. So we'll go through some examples in a bit. So a newbie product manager always thinks the typical software as a service flow is sign up, somebody pays, somebody converts to customer. I think somebody's just going to land on your website and say, wow, this is a wonderful product. And then just put in the money, just swipe their card and convert to a customer. Now, SaaS in this case is software as a service, right? We've been through what the difference between a product company and a services company are. If you haven't seen that video, it's part of Meta Startup, the Meta Startup series. Make sure you watch it. So a SaaS company is a type of digital product company where you pay subscription to use some software, which is usually on the cloud. So you sign up, you pay, and you convert to customer. This is what a typical product manager thinks life is like. But the real SaaS flow is actually much harder. Somebody signs up, they don't do anything, they get sent an email after 1 week, they sign in again, then you ask them to participate in a webinar because they're not interested in buying your product right now, they're too busy. Then you make them have a call with sales because they're still too busy or they're still not interested enough. And then they have a second call with sales where sales really says, look, we can actually drive value for you. Here's some free coupons or whatever. Then the customer finally pays and then they convert to customer, right? It's a lot harder than you think it is when you realize that people are busy and they have their own lives. And if you don't account for that, you're never going to build a good product, right? You have to have a product that has some sort of retention and bringing people back to the subject at hand. So you might want to write this down. When it comes to acquisition, the key metrics are your click-through rate. So if you run an ad and 100 people see it, how many people clicked on it? Is it 5? Is it 6? If you've run an ad 10,000 times, how many people have clicked through to it? Right? So you measure this out of 100. It's a percentage. That's your CTR. Then there's the idea of customer acquisition cost. Say John has come to your website, right? And he's done a lot of things and finally he's ended up paying. And you know that finding somebody like John costs you $100, somebody who actually pays, not somebody who just comes to your landing page, but somebody who actually pays. You have to figure out what the cost of acquiring that customer is, because it's not just the click-through rate. It's also, you have to probably send him an email, make a call. There are costs involved in all of that. Then there's the idea of landing page conversion rate. So sometimes you have a landing page and somebody has to sign up on that page. What is the percentage of people who arrive on that landing page? Say you're doing a special Diwali offer and 100 people land up on that page. What percentage of people have actually signed up? Whereas the click-through rate is more about the ad itself. The landing page conversion rate is about the landing page. Then there's the idea of activation. How much time are people spending on your site or your app? What is the bounce rate? The bounce rate is essentially for every 100 people who come in, how many people leave, right? Without visiting a second page or spending enough time on the platform. So a person could come to your page, just look at it, not be interested, leave. That person has been on exactly one page of your platform, which means that user bounced. If he's been on 2 pages, that means he's not bounced. So how many people just look at one page and leave? Scrolling through the headlines, right? So bounce rate can mean different things for different companies, but in general, it's about how many people are bouncing off your page, right? CPS, which is the cost per sign up. We've spoken about this. This is similar to a landing page conversion rate, whereas your landing page conversion rate might not actually be about a sign up. It could be, something like email. It could be anything, right? It could be conversion on anything. But a cost per sign up is specifically about sign up. It's a more specific version of the landing page conversion rate. Then there's the idea of successful onboarding. Different companies call different things a successful onboarding, right? At Avalon, at one of our products, Foxbound, we call a user is successfully onboarded if they've sent out at least one campaign, right? And we know that out of every 10 users that use the platform, at least 4 send out a successful campaign. or one campaign. And for us, that's a successful onboarding. But for different companies, it could mean different things. I'll give you an idea, right? So if you're talking about a customer relationship management tool, you might think a successful onboarding would just be a sign up, but it's not, right? For some companies, especially bigger companies like Salesforce, their successful onboarding metric might be somebody who comes in and at least uses the platform for a week. It could be somebody who comes in and goes through the tutorial. Maybe you have a tutorial video, and if you finish watching the tutorial video, that's a successful onboarding. Or you've clicked through 4 parts of the platform that you purposely make them click. So successful onboarding can mean many different things for different companies, and you need to define what is yours, right? For example, when you buy, say, a mouse, a Logitech mouse, maybe a successful onboarding for Logitech could be you downloading the mouse software, right, on your computer. So different products, different offline, online could mean different things. Then with retention, there's the idea of daily active users, which is on a daily basis, how many of your users actually sign in and use the platform. Then there's the idea of monthly active users, right? On a monthly, how many people actively use your platform. Then there's the idea of churn rate, which is out of every 100 people, how many people leave your platform every month, right? How many people are leaving? And many businesses, SaaS businesses would be called successful if they have less than 5% churn rate every year, which is 5% of the user base is leaving by the end of the year, at any point during the year. And you calculate that yearly, you can calculate that monthly. So your churn rate is basically the health of your business. Obviously, you don't want to run a business where you acquire a customer, you spend some money on that, and next month that person has churned or gone or left your platform, not paying you anymore. The next idea is the idea of revenue. And for those, we have the key metrics of ARPU, which is annual revenue per user. How much money per user are you making per year? Then it's the idea of lifetime value, which is if a user comes in, what is the total amount that user will pay you over how many ever years, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, what is the total amount you can make from the user? How much can you upsell the user and make from that? The average number is called the lifetime value. Then there's the idea of revenue churn rate, which is very similar to your normal churn rate, but it's a little different because you could have a lot of smaller users churn and they might be paying you maybe $1 or $2 a month or something like that. But you might have 10 really big clients paying you $1 million who don't churn at all. So your regular churn rate and your revenue churn rate could be two completely different things, right? In this case, the revenue churn rate is specifically the amount of revenue you lose by the end of the year. It could be monthly too. Then there's the idea of annual recurring revenue, which is how much money are you consistently being paid per year, and monthly recurring revenue, which is how much money are you consistently being paid per month. With referrals, one of the key metrics that I like measuring is the net promoter score, which is how likely is somebody to recommend this product to their friend. Then there's the idea of, then there's the concept of invitation sent, which is on average, how many invitations do your customers send their friends? Right? Do they invite 5 friends? Do they invite 2 friends? How many? Then there's the idea of app installs per invite, right? Which is if a user is inviting his friend, how many of those people actually install the app or install your product or sign up or pay you or whatever, right? You can have different metrics for this. Then it's about the signups per invite, which is, we like to call it the loop rate, which is for every invite being sent out by a referral user, which is a customer, how many of those people are signing up? So we're going to start with activation specifically because the acquisition part of this is being covered on the marketing side of things, even though it is kind of a product function. That's why I said, right, all of these fields, product, sales, marketing, they're a continuous spectrum. It's not separate silos, right? It's a continuous spectrum. So we're not going to go through acquisition. That's Abhinav's job. Abhinav Arora from my team. He's handled millions of dollars in ad spend. Wonderful gentleman. Hopefully his content teaches you a little more about acquisition. But we're going to get right to the activation part of things, right? So there's a small window to get the user to understand the aha moment, right? So like I said, all products have something called an aha moment, right? Which is use it and you just get what it does. Every product needs to have this. So this is the cool function, the cool feature. For example, it's fairly obvious with something like a mouse or a phone. You just know what it is. But with new products, you just need to know, oh, this is what it does. And you might think, oh, it's fairly obvious what my product does. But no, it's not. People are busy. And if you're building some enterprise-grade security software, which nobody knows about, your product should have the aha moment very quickly so people don't get bored and leave. This is less important for something like an e-commerce business where you don't have that much of activation effort, right? Because at the end of the day, people are coming on a platform, they're scrolling through different objects, and they might find something they like. You have the idea of trial periods during the activation and onboarding where you don't want to charge a user till they're already happy or they understand the aha moment. So you kind of give them 14 days or 21 days to understand the aha moment because they might be busy at this time point. To give you an idea, Foxbound has a trial period of 14 days. So on Twitter activates you by asking you to follow some people. Apple Music activates you by asking you to pick some genres and artists. Dropbox asks you to upload a file. They actually tell you upload your first file. And to all of these different companies, these are successful onboardings, right? When you follow those 5 or 10 people that Twitter asks you to follow, when you create a new account, that's a successful onboarding for them. When Apple Music asks you to say, I like Hindi, I like a drama, I like, hip hop, that's a successful onboarding because they can give you a set of first artists. Dropbox, when you upload a file, they're like, yeah, now this guy gets how this platform works. That is a successful onboarding. So activation criteria for you could be 2 or 3 page views. It could be 10 to 30 seconds spent on a website. It could be 3 or 5 clicks. It could be 1 key feature used. It could be onboarding completed. It could be tutorial video watched. It could be a bunch of different things, right? This is really dependent on your product. But measure it, write it down. Or rather, write it down and then measure it. So here's an example. What we do is, we'd have a sign up now button. And what we do is we would A/B test it, have a different button, which is try it free, and make a lot of such guesses. So in the activation period, because you don't know what's going to work best, because this is your user's first interaction with you, you try many different things. You make an educated guess, you try it, and then you check your activation metrics. Let's go back to the activation metrics, which is the time on site, you check the bounce rate, you check the cost per sign up, and you check the successful onboarding, right? How many people are successfully being onboarded. So you check all of those 4 things. You're trying to optimize for those metrics. You might also be optimizing for the 2 to 3 page views, 10 to 30 seconds per website, spent on website, clicks, key feature, doesn't matter what it is. But the point is you need to drive these people to do this. And the way to do it is by A/B testing as many things, make a lot of random guesses, right? Or educated guesses, I like to call it, and try it out. Retain users, now we're talking about retention. Retain users using notification, alerts, and emails. These are the primary ways. Facebook's has this very famous feature, which is your friend mentioned you in a comment. This is an example of a retention feature, right? Because your friend mentioned you in a comment, you will click on it and you will go to Facebook because you're like, what did my friend say about me? Lifecycle, you can use something called mautic.org, which is free, which allows you to send emails every 5, 10, or 15 days after a user signs up. If a user signed up and not logged back into the platform, you need to annoy that person, right? Or rather than annoy, you need to tell the person, hey, come back, check us out. So after 5 days, maybe you can send him a little bit of content. After 10 days, you can send him a newsletter, with some interesting things. After 15 days, you could just send him a picture of your face and say, why did you leave? Right? And we've done all of these things in the past and they work, right? You can probably send a breakup email after 30 days and just say, look, we tried hard. You're not interested in us. You don't like us anymore. Sorry, I'm not going to bother you again. So you can do that, or you can do event-based emails. So if a user has set up or started a campaign or done something interesting on your platform, maybe 5 days later you can tell him, hey, you set up a campaign, but you're not checking out how many responses you've received. Or you've run these ads and you're not looking at what the numbers are, right? So it could be anything. So you have to use content to re-engage users. Users will mostly churn because either they're busy or they're not interested enough. And one of the ways to make users really interested is to build an oxygen product. An oxygen product, and I like to categorize products into oxygen products and non-oxygen products. Oxygen products are products that users really need and cannot survive without, right? Your phone is an oxygen product. You can't survive without it. Build something like email, which is an oxygen product. You can't survive without it. PowerPoint, for me, that's an oxygen product. It might not be an oxygen product for you. I use Google Slides, but whatever, Google Slides presentations, they're an oxygen product for me, right? So something which is not useful, for example, for somebody like me, an enterprise grade security product might not be useful, right? So it's not an oxygen product for me, but it could be an oxygen product for somebody who is a CIO or a security expert at a company, right? So it really depends on whether it's an oxygen product for that person that you're selling it to. So here's an example of one of these retention tools. I think it's called Clever Reach. So in this example, you can see there's you can, when somebody buys something in the lenses category, after 28 days, it sends them reminders. And if they open and click it, I don't know why the spelling is poor. I think this has been translated. But yeah, if the person has clicked it, then after 2 days, send them fashion glasses. If they've not, then delete that person. If they bought a smartphone, after 2 days you give them more. I mean, you could be very programmatic about this, right? And you don't have to use any actual code. In the past you did. You actually have to write code for this. But today there are tools, email automation tools, marketing automation tools that allow you to, depending on a trigger, right? And you have to code these triggers into the platform, and we'll come to that when we talk about product. You can actually have different people clicking on different things or being sent different emails. So you can actually have different people being sent different emails depending on what actions they took on the platform. You should check some of these tools out. Again, we're not affiliated with any of these tools. I just picked out images from Google to get my point across. But we use similar tools. We actually use Mautic. The next thing is to use the Net Promoter Score, right? And you usually send this in an email and you ask users how happy they are with the product. If they score above 8 on 10, you should ask them to refer the product to their friends, right? You should kind of make if you've been through meta psychology content or the meta management content, you'll understand how people like playing status games, right? So invite only or exclusive invites, they allow people to feel like they're playing status games. So it allows people to rank higher because they feel like, oh, only I have an invite. And Snapchat did this in the earliest days where, you wanted, or Dota did this in the very early days where only few people had the invites and only they had the ability to give it across. And they were the ones, in fact, that drove most of the traffic to the platform. So there are 3 groups of people in the Net Promoter Score, right? And Net Promoter Score is very simple. It gives you 10 stars and it asks you to rate the product on a scale of 10, right? And if you choose between 0 to 6, the people between 0 to 6, they need some outreach to make sure that they don't damage your brand, because these people are clearly unhappy. You've probably not delivered on what you said you would, or you wasted them time, or you wasted them money. They're angry with you, right? So you need to contact them and say, how can I make things better? And they're not satisfied with what you're doing. So maybe it's your product that needs work too. Then there's the passives, which they will rate you between 7 to 8. They like your product, but they also, they don't mind if a competitor comes and gives them a cheaper product. And usually they're left out of the calculation, right? We don't care so much about them because we are not fully sure which side they're on. They're dicey. Then there's the promoters, right? People who love your product, who are loyal to you and will repurchase and will talk to other people about you. When we started doing the Meta Startup course and we started doing it for free, we had a lot of people who were promoters, right? Even today, people who've done the Meta course or who are doing the Meta course, you guys have become promoters, right? You go and you tell other people about this because you love what we're doing it for free. And you're like, yeah, this is awesome stuff, right? I want to be involved in this and I want to tell other people about it. And that is an NPS score of 9 to 10, right? So we also measure this over email. We have a very, very high NPS score. So one way you can do retention or referrals in this case, I think this is about referrals, is you can actually give people free rides. So Uber did this, right? It said, look, here's a promo code specifically for you, and every time somebody signs up, we'll give you a 10% off, or they will get a free ride and so will you, or something like that. So in the beginning, Uber scaled by giving people free rides. And, as a company, one of the reasons you would raise capital is to make sure that you're able to incentivize users in the early days like this. But, some people are taking it too far. They give discounts all the time. That is not a sustainable model. Right? So here's the structure of a typical app. And I specifically want to go through the structure of a typical app so that you understand how this works, right? And this is the last slide of this deck, I promise. So maybe you have 2 different types of ads, right? And you're selling, say, some sort of product. So maybe you're selling clothes, right? You might think that the idea is to have a website with a lot of clothes on it. People are going to land on that website and they're going to convert. But the truth is, people are not going to organically land on your website unless you're massive, unless you're a big company and everybody knows about you. Instead, what you would most likely be doing is advertising. So maybe you have 2 sets of ads. One set of ads run to females where you show them a landing page just with female clothes. Because obviously, if you run an ad to somebody and they just see male clothes and they're female, they're just not going to be interested. You have a short period of time to get their attention. So maybe you run ads specifically to females with a landing page which leads to a landing page specifically to female customers. So it could be yoursite.com/female clothes. Right? And they see, some things that they might be interested in. And you can go granular with this. In Abhinav's section of the content, you could create landing pages very specifically for very, very specific type of people with very specific attributes that you can target on Facebook. Then on the other end, you have Facebook ads run to males, which have landing pages to male customers, right? Which you show male products. Maybe you show a ring, maybe you show a hat, whatever. Doesn't matter. And then at the back end, this is your app and website that it's going to, which is structured into 4 pieces. There's a front end, which is the piece that most people see. Then there's the back end, which is doing all your calculation, your pricing, filling in the blanks basically. And we'll show you what this is like in a future episode. Then there's the database, which stores all this data. So the backend literally takes data out of the database, does some math on it, and then sends it to the front end. The front end is like the wrapper, the backend is kind of like the chocolate inside, and the database is kind of the gooey liquid in the center, which has all this sweet stuff. Then there's the server, right, which actually keeps all of this running, right? So the server is where all of this is actually hosted. Then there's some third-party application programmer interfaces. Maybe you need to connect to the weather app for some reason to figure out what the weather is like in that country and display it. You are not going to find out what the weather is. You don't have a balloon flying somewhere outside, but maybe a meteorological department has this, and you want to interface with their API or with their kind of data using something called an API. So APIs allow different apps to connect to each other. And then you have maybe an email or a social automation tool like Mautic to again send people back to the landing page or to retarget at the landing page or back to the ads instead. Right, so all of this is very important. This is a structure of a typical app. We're going to get more granular in the next few episodes, but so far this is about it. Hope you had a first 101. I know this was a long episode, but we'll get more granular in a bit, I promise.